Hello, thank you for tuning into this video. It's recorded for Uniting Wellbeing event in Jersey. My name is Steve Warmby. I work for the Government of Jersey as a primary mental health worker within the Psychology and Wellbeing Service. And this sits below children, young people, education and skills. My background profession is occupational therapy, and I'm a trained teacher in mindful self-compassion, which is an 8-week program developed in 2010 by Kristin Neff, who's a researcher, and Christopher Germer, who's a psychologist. I'm also trained in the teenage version of this, which is called Making Friends with Yourself. And we've offered this to all colleges and secondary schools in Jersey. More recently, I have been involved in a pilot for younger children, ages 7 to 11. And we have run this in 3 primary schools to date in Jersey as well. And hopefully we'll be offering more of that as we get back to school. So just to give you an outline of this session, we will begin by exploring self-compassion, and I'll use a number of slides to do that, thinking about what it is, how it is helpful for our well-being, and also why it's challenging. We'll then go into a guided practice for about 15 to 20 minutes. But before that, I will also talk through some grounding practices, which is really techniques to bring ourselves back into the present moment, which is particularly helpful if we're feeling overwhelmed with our emotions. And this can happen sometimes when we're bringing attention to our difficulties, which is what we will be doing when we're learning how to be self-compassionate. Before we start, I'd just like to do a breathing space practice. And this is helpful because it allows us to really touch base with how we're doing, how we're feeling inside in this moment, bringing attention to our internal environment. And when we're much more self-aware, we can then make decisions about how we would like to respond. And if we're feeling very emotional, we might make a decision just to press pause, do something else for the time being, maybe come back at a later date. So it's always a good opportunity just to notice what's happening right now. So the option is to have your eyes open or closed. Usually it's more easier with eyes closed, but some people prefer to keep their eyes open. And maybe if that's the case, you could perhaps just lower your gaze. So choosing, if you want to close your eyes now and just get settled into your seat. Or if you're lying down, that's fine as well. And the first thing that you can be aware of is any sensations internally. And that might be in the form of body sensations. There might be areas of the body that feel tight, some sort of sense of emptiness or bracing. We might also be aware of tightness in the body where we may have some particular discomfort. And as best you can, just seeing if you can allow space for any sensations to be present. Not trying to change anything, just allowing it to be as it is, at least in these passing moments. You might also notice thoughts coming and going. Sometimes it's quite difficult to just pinpoint one thought at a time if it's very busy. Mind can be very active. So you can just notice that if the mind is very busy. You can just notice busy mind. You might also be able to notice specific thoughts arising. They might be pleasant or unpleasant, or they might be neutral. And again, if possible, let go of any judgment and just observe them as thoughts, as passing events that come and they go. And perhaps also you might be aware of any emotions that are present. Just in the same way, just allowing the emotions to be there if you can. Whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, treating them the same. But just softly labelling, worry's here right now, or boredom is here, or calmness, whatever it is. So from this wide, expansive awareness of our inner experience, now narrow our focus to our breath if that feels comfortable. If you prefer to do something else, you might just focus on sounds. If you're able to focus on the breath, just start to begin to notice where you feel the breath most clearly in the body. This might be in and out of the nose, might be in the chest area, or maybe down in the abdomen. And we're not trying to change the breath, we're just observing it just as it is. Noticing the in-breath, a slight pause before the out-breath, another pause before the next in-breath. And if the mind drifts away, just gently escorting it back to the breath once more. Or if you're using sounds as your anchor, just escorting it back to sounds. Now expanding awareness once more, noticing the breath, but also noticing the body being here, being aware of the posture, whether you're sitting or lying or standing. Also noticing the facial expression, any tension in the forehead or the jaw. Now I'm going to ring a bell. If your eyes are closed, then opening your eyes and seeing if you can bring awareness into the next moments. So the breathing space practice is a really good thing to do if we can every day. It's an opportunity just to stop, to pause, and to notice, how am I doing right now? And this really can help us and help inform what we do next, and especially if we're having a difficult time, if we're noticing that there's lots of struggle, stress, and it can inform us, well, what do I really need to do right now to take care of myself? So I'm just going to bring back some slides now as we start to explore self-compassion. So what sometimes is helpful is to consider, what do we mean by compassion, firstly? And if we think about a situation where we feel compassion, the first thing is that we have to notice that there's some form of suffering going on. So right now, amidst the coronavirus pandemic, we can see whenever we turn on the TV, we can see suffering. And whether that's directly noticing patients on a ward or relatives grieving, or the workforce, the stress that they're under, but also other people keeping the island going, people worrying about their jobs or education. So there's so much very visible suffering at the moment. And we do have to be careful, because we can't be receptive to this 24 hours a day. It was just be overwhelming. So we do have to choose and select times when we'll tune in and notice what's going on. That's really important. In itself, that is self-compassion. But we have to notice suffering first, and then we have a sense of relating to that other person or a group of people. We recognise that we could be in that situation if we were unfortunate. So there's a sense of connection with that other person that we're seeing on TV or in person. And then there's a wish for that person to be free from suffering. I hope that somebody will get better, or the stress on the workforce starts to reduce. And this is a kindness part of compassion. So there's a definition here from the Greater Good Science Centre. Compassion literally means to suffer together. Among emotion researchers, it is defined as the feeling that arises when you're confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. An example of this is the applause on a Thursday. The frontline staff really are trying to show the appreciation for what they do. And there's a hope that that actually helps in some way, makes it a little easier. So when we think of self-compassion, it's exactly the same thing, but towards ourselves. Christine Neff has come up with a model with 3 parts. And the first part is mindfulness, paying attention on purpose to the present moment and in a particular way. So often we're in the future with our thoughts, or we're back in the past. Mindfulness really is about coming into this moment, this present moment, paying attention as it unfolds. And a particular way involves a number of qualities or attitudes that we bring. So we're not just concentrating in the present moment, but also bringing these qualities of allowing, acceptance, non-judging, letting be, and curiosity as well. Even though it might be difficult, we're curious about what that experience is. And the second part then is that we're connected. So this common humanity. Sometimes when people are struggling, they feel quite alone with it. They feel isolated, as if there's something wrong with them. But when we recognise that all human beings will experience a whole range of emotions, will go through a whole range of life events, and that's part of being a human being, it helps make us realise that we actually are connected in our struggles rather than disconnected. And then the final part then is kindness. So when we notice we're struggling in a particular moment, we share this with other people, we then try and see how we can bring kindness to ourselves in that experience. And it's important that we're not trying to get rid of suffering in that way when we bring it to ourselves. We're just holding ourselves with kindness until the suffering eases. It's a little bit like if you had the flu You can't get rid of the flu, but you can be with yourself tenderly until that flu starts to pass. So what are the benefits? Over the last 10 years, there's a vast amount of research that shows numerous benefits of self-compassion, mindfulness and self-compassion. So, firstly, strongly associated with emotional well-being. And that really comprises less anxiety, less stress, less depression. Maintenance of healthy habits such as diet and exercise. Satisfying personal relationships. Reduce caregiver fatigue. So important right now when we think about all the stress that's happening in people with caregiving roles. And there was a randomized controlled trial that was completed of the Mindful Self-Compassion course. And it found that the benefits were maintained 12 months after the course finished. So it wasn't just helpful during the course or just afterwards, but they were maintained as well, which is so important. So when we practice and develop compassion for ourselves, we can do it in two different ways. One is a formal way, which is like a meditation. So we have a number of different meditations in the course. One is called affectionate breathing, which is very similar to a normal mindfulness of the breath practice, but we bring a few more instructions into it. We have a compassionate body scan, loving kindness practice, and also giving and receiving compassion, which again very helpful in terms of caregiving roles. So they're the formal practices, but informal practices are just as important. So our informal practices include mindful eating and savouring as we're eating, mindful walking and savouring as we walk, noticing what's around us, really tuning in to the sounds and what we can see and feel. And also then being mindful and compassionate in our everyday activities. So when we notice that we're having a hard time, it's then really choosing, what do I need? And that might be to go and have a cup of tea, or have a soak in the bath, or go and speak to a friend, go for a walk or a jog. So really choosing to be behaviourally self-compassionate. You can also be mindful and compassionate when we're listening. Notice how we tend to rehearse when we're listening in terms of what we want to say next, and instead see if we can just pay attention to the person who's speaking. So we know there are numerous benefits of being more self-compassionate, and yet a big research project in America showed that 4 out of 5 people, and every 5 people, are actually more compassionate towards others than towards themselves. And of that 1 out of 5, most of those were about equal. So there's a very, very small percentage of people who are more compassionate towards themselves than other people. So it makes you wonder, if it's so good for us, why isn't it that we do it? Why don't we find it easy to do? And a lot of that might be just the way we're brought up. Often we think of being kind to ourselves as indulgent or selfish, or a form of self-pity. We might think it undermines motivation. But the research shows that the opposite is true. If we think about motivation, if you have decide that you're going to start to go jogging and you want a coach, and you have somebody who starts to criticize you all the time, puts you down, says you're not good enough, what's the point? And then you have another coach who's saying, keep going. I know this is difficult, you're doing well, keep going. Which coach would you choose to go back to? And yet in our own minds, we usually have the critical coach. We usually have somebody who's criticising every time we make a mistake, has this constant narration about our lives and how we're not good enough. We also have the compassionate voice, that's supportive, that's caring. And it's the same voice that we would say towards a friend or a loved one who is struggling with a similar situation. We'd be kind. Our tone of voice would be very different to when it's ourselves. So the first thing is really to recognise that we have this capacity to be kinder to ourselves, but it takes time. And this diagram here just shows that whenever we're being compassionate, learning how to be compassionate, we have to bring up some difficulty or notice some difficulty for compassion to be possible. But we want to work with mild to moderate difficulty. If it becomes overwhelming, it's no longer possible. Cognitively, we're offline. And so what happens is if we feel really overwhelmed, whether we feel really angry, really anxious, whether we feel distressed, the instruction is to come back into safety. And we can do that in a number of ways. We can do that through a grounding practice, which is what we'll come on to now. Or we can do it in a behavioural way, such as I need to take myself away, have a cup of tea, speak to a friend, go for a walk, do some artwork, listen to some music, whatever it may be. So grounding or anchoring, these are just techniques that really helps us come back into this present moment when we start to notice our emotions start to feel too much. There's various different types of grounding practices, and I'm just going to go through some right now. So when we go on to the meditation, if you find yourself just too much, it's just too overwhelming, then you may be able to choose one of these practices that we'll go through. Generally speaking, when we have heightened emotions, they tend to be in our core, might be the throat, the chest, or the stomach. As a rule, it's in this area. So if we still want to be present, but we want to be in a position where it's not too overwhelming, we can use our extremities, our hands and our feet. So one of the things, if you want to practice right now, is just where you are, see if you can push your feet down into the floor. As you push your feet into the floor, notice the sensations beneath the soles of your feet. And also be aware of the muscles in your legs as you push down. And then as you release, noticing the change in sensations in the muscles and beneath your feet. Also then with our hands, we can do this in a number of ways, and this one is called Palm Present Moment, whether I can show this on the camera. So this is quite useful if you're just noticing your mind is quite distracted. It just helps you to focus and slow down. So if you can just see here, what I'm going to do is just touch the tips of the little fingers. And when I do that, I'm bringing to mind the sensations of this touch, holding this in awareness. And then I touch the fingertips of the ring fingers. Notice the sensations. And I'm bringing both of these contacts into awareness at the same time. And I add in the tips of the middle fingers, and then the index fingers, and then side tips of the thumb. Again, noticing all of those contact points at the same time. And then I'm going to start to push the fingers together and the palms together. Noticing the temperature. Noticing the fleshy parts, bony parts of the hands. And then I'm going to push against them. Push each palm against each other. Notice the tension in my hands, but also my arms, my shoulders. And then I'm going to release the tension, but keep the hands together, noticing the difference. Keeping all the fingertips together and then parting the palms. Notice the change in temperature. And then one by one, just releasing thumb, index finger, the middle finger, ring finger, and then the little finger. And you just shake your hands out a little bit. It's quite a nice one just to slow down. Not the best probably if you're feeling quite agitated. If you're feeling agitated, it's probably best to do something a bit more vigorous rather than something too slow. You might find it quite difficult to do. We can also use any object as a focus of attention. So here, I've got a little polished stone. And often use these within schools as a way of bringing attention if we start to notice we're getting a bit overwhelmed. And we can just first of all just feel the stone, noticing the texture of it. So this one is generally quite smooth, but also noticing little bits of rough parts, rough edges. And then we can notice the shape using our eyes, the colours, reflection of light. Just being curious, bringing attention to the stone. We can also be aware of the movement that my fingers make in order to rotate the stone. I don't have to consciously think about this, it just happens automatically. So we're just pivoting our attention from something that feels a bit overwhelming, expanding our awareness now to an object, in this case, the stone. One of the other things we can do is using our main five senses. And sometimes we hear this being called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the 5 is 5 things that we can see. If we're doing a practice with our eyes closed, we will open our eyes and just look around, just silently labelling 5 things that we can see in our environment. And if we're noticing that we're feeling very closed, maybe we're looking downwards, I recommend that you really look around the room, look up to the ceiling, look around to the sides, because in doing so you're opening up your body, which sends messages to the brain that we're not under threat. So once you've done 5 things that you can see, you go to 4 things that you can feel. And even without moving, we can feel things. So we might be able to feel our body against the surface it's sitting or lying on or standing. We might notice clothing in contact with the skin. We might notice wherever our hands are positioned, maybe on our lap or together. And we can deliberately hold something, such as the stone or anything else, clothing, clean clothing, deliberately holding something. Really notice the sensations of touch. And then 3 things that we can hear. We're tuning into the environment once more, noticing sounds. Noticing the sound of my dog who's on the sofa behind this laptop, breathing, just dreaming, I think. And sometimes we can even label silence, even little spaces between sounds. Then we go to 2 things that we can smell or imagine the smell of. So we might be in a place where there's odours available, and maybe there's air diffuser or soap or something like that. We might notice the smell of soap on our hands. We might notice the smell on our clothing. But if not, we can imagine a smell, a pleasant smell that we can associate with. So some common ones are the smell of freshly baked bread or cakes, smell of coffee. I like the smell of walking past a laundrette. And when we're actually in a situation where we can smell these things, the more we can really pay attention to them at the time, the more easier it is to bring them back at a point where perhaps they're not available. And finally, one thing that we can taste or imagine the taste of. So often we have a residual taste, whether we've just brushed our teeth or whether we've had a drink or something we've eaten. But if not, we just think of a favourite food. And with children, the most common one is pizza, probably followed next by chocolate. So these are just examples of some practices that you can do, just coming back into the present moment when things become a little bit more difficult. One of the things that we do teach on the course is something called soothing touch. And this is part of the mammalian caregiving system. So all mammals differ from reptiles in the fact that they nurture their young. And when the young is distressed in any way, then the parent, usually the mother, will connect with that infant or baby. And there'll be a few things in place. The first thing is touch, so they'll make contact, there'll be warmth, and then the third thing is often soft, gentle vocalization. So there'll be some sounds that the parent or the caregiver will be giving towards that young child or baby. And when these things are in place, there's a physiological response which results in the production of oxytocin. And this is a hormone, sometimes called a cuddle hormone. It helps to soothe when we're feeling in distress. And just in the same way, we can have oxytocin produced when we're being hugged by someone else. We can do that for ourselves by soothing touch. So one of the things that you can try out now, if it feels okay for you, is just to explore a couple of positions. And the first one is one hand or two hands over the heart area. And you can experiment a little bit about whether the touch feels better just being light or a bit more firmer. And noticing that contact. And you might also then be able to feel some warmth radiating in the palm of your hand into your body. And then keeping one hand on the chest, moving another hand down onto the belly. Again, noticing the contact, noticing any warmth. Just being open and curious about how it feels. And just try giving yourself a little bit of a self-hug, a bit of a squeeze. And then just cupping one cheek in a hand. Or using two hands, noticing how it feels, or just softly stroking the back of your hands or arms. Sometimes people immediately find soothing touch is comforting. For other people, they find it might be the opposite of that. It might feel very awkward or might bring up some difficult feelings. So just being gentle with it, exploring, just trying it over a period of time. You know, for me, when I first practiced this, I found it very difficult. But now, putting two hands over my heart area, I find very soothing, very grounding, and noticing feeling stress. It really helps me to reconnect. So we're going to go into a meditation. So maybe just before we start, if again just doing a little bit of a check-in, noticing how you're doing. Always feeling free just to press pause and take a break if you need to. And with this meditation, we're going to be starting off again with a wide awareness, bringing attention gradually closer towards ourselves, becoming very sort of deep within and then back out again. So if you're happy to proceed, just starting off with a comfortable position, something that you feel that you can maintain for around 15 to 20 minutes. And if you can, just start with your eyes open, and just noticing what you can see with your eyes. And making a choice whether you'd like to close your eyes, and if so, doing so now, or if you prefer just lowering your gaze. And if you have your eyes closed, you might notice some light penetrating through the eyelids, any particular colours or shapes. And then paying attention to sounds, beginning with sounds on the edge of awareness. Maybe sounds outside of the room or outside of your home. And bring in a quality of curiosity. Letting go of any judgments of unpleasant sounds or pleasant sounds. Just notice sound itself. And bringing attention a little closer to notice sounds within the room. And then closer again to notice sounds very close to the body. Maybe you can notice the sound of your own breath. Bring attention now to the surface of your skin. You might notice the temperature of the skin, where clothing makes contact. Maybe around the sleeves or around the neck. And also noticing contact points between the body and the surface in which you're sitting or lying. A sense of pressure. And then if you're okay with it, dropping beneath the skin now. So noticing inside the body. Maybe comparing whether the body inside the skin feels warmer than outside of the skin. Is there a difference? Noticing the energy within the body. Does the body feel tired? Does it feel energized? feel quite settled or restless. And again, letting go of any judgment, you're just noticing it just as it is right now. Your attention might be drawn to areas of discomfort within the body. And if that is the case, see if you can incline towards this area with kindness. You might imagine wrapping a warm towel around this area as a way of soothing. We're not trying to get rid of any discomfort, we're just holding it tenderly. And giving it space as best we can to be there. You might also notice parts of the body which feel quite neutral, or maybe even relaxed. And if this is the case, it's an opportunity to bring some appreciation for the fact that this part of the body feels good right now. And then if you're happy to continue, dive in a little deeper to notice sensations of breathing. You're noticing the difference in qualities between the in-breath and the out-breath. You might notice the air slightly warmer as you breathe out. You're noticing how the body is nourished by the in-breath. And then there's a sense of release or letting go as you breathe out. You don't have to change the breath in any way, we're just observing it just as it is. Rising and falling. Rising and falling like waves in the ocean. There's nothing we need to do. And if your breathing is difficult, then again an opportunity to bring a sense of kindness to that part of the body. Nourishing that part of the body well. We can say to ourselves, may I feel ease in my breath. And if your breathing feels good, again an opportunity to offer some appreciation for the work that your body is doing. And if you like, allow yourself to enjoy this gentle rocking motion of the breath. Now we're going to expand our awareness again. So from the breath, bringing awareness back out towards the rest of the body. Noticing again temperature of the body, any sensations. Noticing how sensations may have changed. Continuing with that curiosity of anything unfolding within the body right now. Having a sense of the energy within the body. Whether it's starting to feel a little bit more unsettled and restless, or whether it's still relatively calm, if that was the case. Moving attention back now to the outside of the skin. Noticing the sensations here. Touch of clothing, contact points between the body and the chair or the floor. And coming back to noticing the sound of the breath, or sounds very close. And then out further to sounds within the room. And if our hearing is good, again another opportunity to be grateful. I'm grateful to be able to hear. And then moving further away again, to notice any sounds outside of the room, in the distance. And then if your eyes are closed, begin by opening them. Again, looking around the room, noticing what you can see. Now it's an opportunity to just pause and reflect for a few moments. Notice whether there were any challenges that arose. Did it evoke any particular thoughts or feelings? Right now, are those feelings still here? If so, you might just think about what you need right now. Maybe to go for a walk afterwards, or a little bit of stretching. One of the common challenges that people notice is that their mind drifts away. Just to know that there's nothing going wrong when that happens, that is what the mind does at rest. The important thing is when we notice a mind drifts away, we then just gently escort it back to our focus of attention. So it doesn't matter how many times the mind comes and goes, or attention comes and goes, we just keep bringing it back. And Christopher Willard, who's a psychologist and meditation teacher, he uses the 3 R's for mindfulness. And the first R is to rest attention. So we're not grabbing onto something, holding it tightly, we're just resting our attention on something. And the second R is when we recognize when our attention moves away. And then the third R is when we return our attention back to our focus once more. I like to see it as like a little butterfly landing somewhere, resting, and drifting away, and then coming back. So the last slide I want to show is some resources Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook by Kristin Neff and Christopher Germer. I think that's 2018. And that leads you pretty much through the format of the course. The next one, the pink one, the Self-Compassion Workbook for Teens, is by Karen Bluth. And this is based on the Making Friends with Yourself program. The middle one, again, Kristin Neff, Self-Compassion Step by Step, and that's a 6 CD audio, again, leading you through the course, and also gives a bit of personal history. And then the final two books, one again by Kristin Neff, Self-Compassion, and the other one by Christopher Germer, The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion. The website link at the bottom, www.center, spelled the American way, or msc.org, and that is the main Mindful Self-Compassion website. You can find a lot of information on there. They do an online Mindful Self-Compassion course as well. So if you wanted to find out any information, that would be a good place to go. I have a number of audio meditations on the SoundCloud app. So if you've got that app, or you can download it for free and search my name, you'll find there's a number of quite brief, mostly brief audio practices there. So I hope that this has been worth your time and that you found something of interest. It's been helpful in some way, and I wish you well. Thank you very much again, and enjoy the rest of the weekend.